Hi, welcome to another episode of Life Science Mentors 180-Day Challenge, How to Become an Idea Machine. And today's 10 ideas are Quora. 10 questions of Quora that you are pulled to answer or compelled to answer. And I realize more and more that Quora is actually a really great resource for several reasons. So first of all, you always want to write about something that is interesting, not only to yourself, but also to other people, right? And so one way to look for people's pain points or what people desire, so then you know what people are drawn to and what people want to know, so you can provide value for them, is to just listen to what people say when they say, "Oh, I wish I could just have this," or "How easy would it be if they could just have this product," or "I absolutely hate this, and that." Right? So then you know what people don't like, and if you provide a solution to their problem, you can you can have a product that you sell to people or give advice that people want to know. Um, and online has is a rich trove. The internet is a rich trove of these ideas. For example, you can just type in search for "I hate" or "I love" on Twitter, and you get like a number of 200 or more tweets all over the recent days where people basically tell you what they like or hate, right? Um, then there's Reddit, which is a rich source of information. If you have any topic you want to talk about, you notice patterns, things that people ask themselves, things that are trending right now, you know. And then Quora, and I didn't realize that. I know some of my friends would be on Quora answering questions. If you want to check out Jody Lillo, does a great job in answering questions. James Altucher also has great questions, great answers to questions. And so I realized when I looked into Quora, holy moly, there's like a lot of things that people want to know because those are things people ask for, right? So looking into Quora gave me some interesting insight. First of all, um, this exercise, this exercise, once again, name 10 questions on Quora to which you're especially drawn or which you feel compelled to answer. First of all, this exercise teaches me people's pain points and desires, right? So basically, people actually ask for help on something or they want to know something. If you can provide the answer for them, if a lot of people ask for that specific problem, then you solve a lot of people's problems, right? If you have the answer for a lot of questions, a lot of different questions from people, you provide value to them. And that's one reason why it makes sense to look into Quora if you look for inspiration. Then, also important, it teaches you which of these pain points, which of these questions you are really good at answering, right? It's one thing to have people say, "I would really like to see this, and that," but then maybe some questions you can't answer because you're not really practicing that. You're not really good in that. So it teaches you to look for those questions that you can actually answer, that you can provide value for. And third, it teaches you what you're really passionate about. Those questions that you absolutely feel pulled and compelled to answer, those are probably the questions that you like talking about and that is actually fun for you to answer. Right? So these are all things I realized when I went through these 10 items. And um, and by the way, if you ever struggle for your daily mental practice to come up with a topic where to have 10 ideas for, you can also just look on Quora, right? So without further ado, these are the 10 questions that I would feel compelled to answer. First question, what are some good mini habits to practice each day? That's an easy question for me because I've practiced a lot of these small steps myself over the past years. Something very simple to making your bed in the morning or being thankful every day. Those are two habits I do every day and they make me happier and more relaxed. Also, just having 3 pages of free writing in the morning It's also something that's very important to me, and um, basically allows me to get something done already at the beginning of the day. So if the whole day went really awry, I still have done something in the very beginning of the day. And so these small habits, mini habits to practice each day, have been incredibly helpful to me. So I actually like to share my experience on that. Question two: what are some ways I can meet and connect with people in New York City? Myself living in the New York City area, it's easy to answer. You just, you go to meetup.com and you find people of all different persuasions, all different paths of life, just interested in one particular hobby, or one particular sports team, or they're interested in taking hikes, or it's not just a meetup group that just meets in one room in New York. It's like those are activities also, right? So you can very easily meet and connect with people in New York. The thing is that New York is like, there's like 8 million people that are walking around on the streets every day. And yet, when I came to New York, the first thing I saw was really striking to me, that very rarely is there any altercation between people bumping into each other. The traffic just moves slowly. And if you've ever driven a car in New York, you know that you lose if you're hesitant. But if you just spot a tiny bit of a let's say you're on the right lane and you drive, and there's traffic overtaking you on the left lane, but you also have a very slow vehicle in front of you, so you want to move to the left lane. The way you do that in New York is not waiting until there's really a huge gap opening up. No, there's a small gap starting to open up. You just take it and drive in, and the others will just slow down and let you in. There's kind of like a very busy, fast flow to New York, but people manage to not bump into each other. And I think that translates into people's activity. People have all kinds of different activities, different interests, but you don't normally, those activities, they don't stream all to congregate at one place. It's not like they are revealing. You can recognize what people's activities are. People keep to themselves. But then, if you just find a way to figure out where the people are that you want to meet, then you're warmly welcome. So the thing is the thing is not in New York, the difficulty is not to meet people. The difficulty is to find the people that have your interest. And the internet, man, that's everything. Meetup.com. You can easily meet people. I have done so. I'm continuing to do so, and it's just, yeah, it's a great opportunity, great treasure trove of opportunities. Meetup.com. And then of course there are other ways, right? You have like a happy hour at work. You can meet people by just suggesting, just like work the room or talk to a few people, and then just suggest to check out this other bar and then move people over. That's also easy. As I said, difficulty in New York is finding the people that want to do what you like to do. That's all. Number 3, an employer said he would call me ASAP to discuss a job position. He reassured me I'm still in the running, but it's been 5 days and he hasn't. I really want the job. What should I do? So there are two possibilities here. One possibility is the employer wants to let the person with the question down easily, right? Doesn't want to tell people no. Some people are very bad at saying no, and you have to kind of like figure out to read into people. If a yes, if it's very tacit, would not rather be a no, right? And that comes from experience. And sometimes I've had employers who just not come back to people because they get a lot of requests, and even though they were interested, that request somehow vanished in the pile of other emails, right? So I know when I was in Princeton, there was a PhD student who wanted to make a postdoc, and I think he asked several times, and his initial email wasn't returned. Yet he stayed persistent, and then ended up to be one of the most successful students ever in that lab. So sometimes you have to be persistent, and I would like to answer the question because I've been working jobs for 20 years, so I have a little bit of experience there. I can tell younger people, and also I want to. I would hate to see people just give up because they have very rigid thoughts about how a whole hiring process has to go, right? So that questions I like to answer. Number 4, I'm considering Dallas and Houston as choices on a list of several possible cities to move to from New York, but I want to eliminate one of them from consideration. Which one should I take off the list? And here, MJ DeMarco has had almost this very same example in his book Millionaire Fastlane. Basically, I think he had the choice between going to Detroit and going to Arizona, or going to Michigan or Arizona to stay within the state level. And what he did was he had like 10 criteria that were important for him in the choice of a city, and then he would rank them or weight them with numbers from 1 to 10. So, for example, if you are really want to go where it's warm, and you had the choice between, I don't know, between South Texas and north of Alaska. It should be very extreme examples, right? So then, even though the north of Alaska would maybe provides you fantastic economic opportunities, and you would have to work a smaller paying job in the south of Texas, if your mood is so dependent on the weather, then then if the weather has a higher priority for you, like the weather has a priority of 10 to you, and the quality of your job has only priority of 7 or 8 to you, right? Then the weather trumps your job, and then you would know you rather work a less paying job, or like rather take some other disadvantages to be where it's really warm. So that's how that works. And DeMarco has described a little bit further, but essentially what it comes down to is basically figuring out the criteria that are important for you when you choose a city, and then weighting them, and then in the end you come up with a number. And so if the number in that case for Houston is a 37, and for Dallas is a 35, then Houston is your city. And most of this is actually about gut feeling as well, and some people may decide completely on their gut. But especially if two cities are reasonably similar, like Dallas and Houston, same area, same state, then a list with like a logically focused list with like numbers would actually at least give you reassurance that you did your choice after careful consideration. Because I think regretting choices means also that you made the choice to begin with in a very you made the choice to begin with from your gut. And if you make the choice from your gut, then you're always kind of dependent on your emotions at that moment. And if you haven't learned to control your emotional state, then you can come to regret decisions, because if you look back on them, you realize, man, I was just in a bad mood when I made the decision, and I should have gone to that city because that made more sense on the long run, right? So this decision matrix is something I can talk about. So that's why I would like to answer question number 4. Question number 5, how do you figure out the equation for photosynthesis? Great question. As a biochemist myself, with a penchant for math, this is something extremely fun for me to answer. So I would basically go take to my drawing board or to a piece of paper and recapitulate how we derived this equation in the past, and then just solve it again and answer the question. Basically, the equation of photosynthesis is about how much CO2 and water basically come together in the photosynthesis reaction to build glucose or fructose, sugars, right? So if you recall, the plants use carbon dioxide and water to build sugars. right? It's a bit more complex than that, but that's the base of it, right? And they use the energy of the sun to um, to basically capture carbon dioxide and water together in sugar molecules. I believe there's also some oxygen involved, but I'm not entirely sure about that anymore. It's a while back, but it'll be fun to figure that out again. It reminds me of my studies in biochemistry. So the number 6 was a question: what are Bach's, Johann Sebastian Bach's most famous pieces? And that is a question I love answering because I love Bach, and it's one of my favorite composers, and I know his works basically inside out, so that I can even recommend different pieces based on seasons or personal mood. For example, this is now very ad hoc, but let's see whether I can find the Christmas Oratorium, and this may not be in the end version of this video, because sometimes YouTube realizes that you put some music in there and they think that's copyright protected, and then they don't let you publish that. Don't ask me how YouTube figures that out. They do. Last time I had a video such as this, and I was playing some other YouTube video with a Bob Dylan song, and when I uploaded the video, it muted it and told me they can't allow me to post it because I used copyrighted material just by listening to some Bob Dylan song in the background. Really, really strange. But so, for example, for this Christmas time, you would have the Christmas Oratorium, which goes something like this. Very nice. I like that a lot. And if you feel if you feel in a mood where you want to get work done but need some music to entertain you in the background, then you can always go to the well-tempered piano, and I think one of the pieces in there would be like this. Is a very regular drive, and therefore I like that a lot. And then there is the Art of the Fugue. Let's see whether I find that. Art of the Fugue. Let's see. Yeah, a musical offering. No, I don't have that. Well, doesn't matter. Musical offering and Art of the Fugue is something that if you feel like more solemn and want to relax and listen, and kind of even get into the meditative mood, those are some pieces I would recommend. So you see, with Bach, I have like I can basically, I know that by heart, and I gladly recommend some pieces if you want to know. So that's a question I love to answer. Then there was an interesting question, number 7. What are some books to stay away from, and why? So there are books to stay away from, really? First of all, don't stay away from any book, right? Beyond that, this question is actually an opportunity to think about books that rile people up, right? So if there's any book that people want you to stay away from, then probably they have a very strong message, right? So the stronger your message, the more likely you have some people that you piss off, that are angered by it, right? So those books are likely very interesting books. So some examples off the top of my head would be Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, which is basically the manifest of capitalism. And if people are very strongly believe in communism and socialism, they may actually be triggered negatively by that book. I personally don't think any book could trigger you, but some people do have problems with somebody making statements and they don't like that. So that is certainly a book that would rile you up. Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged. Then works by Charles Bukowski for the foul language, although it doesn't matter much anymore nowadays. And maybe as number 3, a world map from before 1989. If you want to inform yourself about the current geopolitical situation of the world, I would not use an old world map, right? Which basically, who uses world maps at all anymore, right? You can have everything from the internet up to date. I think whoever invested into the encyclopedia industry in the beginning of the 90s, that was not the best investment, but you know, I'm sure they'll still make some money. So yeah, what are some books to stay away from? I like that question because yeah, you have to think about what are some more controversial books, right? And that is always worth thought. Number 8, what is the hardest thing to get used to after coming to America? So as someone who came to the US from Germany 10 years ago, I can answer this question pretty clearly. Everything was great apart from 2 things: the food. In Germany, you have such a rich assortment in bread. It was a little bit difficult to find that variety, although when you do a little bit of digging, you find amazing bread here as well. But that was something I had to get used to, different food, and then the housing. Everyone builds his houses, or most of the houses are built out of wood and have thin walls. And in Germany, it's just everything is built out of stone. And the walls are thick and very, very isolated to begin with. So that is something I had to get used to. But it's all fine now. I mean, it's just different, and I actually really like the area here, New England. It makes for like mysterious fall atmosphere, winter atmosphere. I love it a lot, and ever since I went in 8th grade in Germany, my mother was was going on a bike trip, and I was in high school, 7th, 8th grade, 8th, 9th grade. And I just got my new computer, and I wanted to work with the computer, play with the computer. And I was at a family, at our recent neighbor, we lived in this, okay, so first we lived in a little village, and then we moved to the city close to the village. And so the neighbors from that village where we lived first took care of me when I was younger. And I still kept friendship with them. So I was basically staying with them while my mother was going on a bike trip with her friends. And then every day in like early afternoon, I would ride my bike into the city, play on the computer or meet with friends, and then come back in the evening. And coming back in the evening on bike was the best because I was driving through the fog. I was driving through fields. There was a lot of fog everywhere, so the sun would just kind of go down, and I came back to a house where the lights were on, and that family had already prepared dinner. So how awesome was that? You go play with your friends, and then you come back to a house that has dinner prepared, and you feel like really home and comfortable. That is just perfect. And so fall time in New England reminds me a little bit of that atmosphere. So that's why I like it a lot. And that's why I can answer questions what people get used to after coming to America. Question number 9. What was your biggest epiphany or moment of insight during your studies of science or math? That's a great question, because the moment of clarity in science or math is all you work for. You try to understand things, and sometimes you realize that the question is more complex than you thought. So you have to dig through all the layers of the problem until you get to the solution. For example, When we had calculus in school, you have this way, you have a function, right? Y equals x to the power of 3 plus 2 times x to the power of 2 minus x plus 5, or something like that, right? And then you calculate the maximum point and the minimum point and the inflection point and everything in that graph. But to do that, you have to first be able to understand concepts of how you calculate the rate in which a function climbs up with increasing x, right? And so then you first build, then you learn how to calculate that and build a function called the first derivative. And then then you have to realize that this derivative has to be 0 in points where the function has a maximum or a minimum, right? And I still know when we had calculus in school and we're just having the derivative explained. And I was working in the garden at home and I was thinking about math all the time. And then it dawned on me that you have to have the first derivative be 0 to determine if something is a maximum or minimum. And that was a revelation right there while working in the garden that I'll never forget. And then another revelation came later on when I did my PhD thesis, and we discovered that one gene that if you take it away, the cells in a developing embryo are not moving to the final places where they're supposed to end up, right? And we found that this gene was regulating a very fundamental process of this cell migration. And so that was a big revelation in and of itself as well. And that was also really great, seeing that, looking at pictures with a microscope and then seeing the difference between the control and the mutants, right? And seeing that the mutants look different from the control, and then designing experiments to further, you have an idea what could happen, and then you design experiments to further look at that idea a little bit further, and then you confirm your initial hypothesis. 90% of the hypotheses are nice thoughts, but then you try to test them experimentally and they don't hold true, so you throw them out. But 10% are true, and finding these 10% is one of the biggest revelation or epiphanies you can have in science. That's what science is all about. And question number 10, what was the most difficult discovery? Developing the atomic bomb or putting a man on the moon? So first of all, that question is more both atomic bomb or putting a man on the moon. Those are engineering feats, not necessarily scientific discoveries. However, it's difficult to decide which was bigger, right? There was a huge national program in both. Maybe the atomic bomb had more lives at stake. Then putting a man on the moon had more like technological advance at stake. So, and was more about giving you an advantage in the Cold War. So I'd say more difficult was probably the atomic bomb, because they had to figure out how to make this recent discovery that you could split a uranium atom, how to put that reaction into a controlled container so that it could actually lead to a concentrated act of explosion, right? If you don't do that, then I think one of the problems they had when developing the atomic bomb is if you just have your uranium, right, and then you just have neutrons bombarded, and then you would set up the atomic reaction, it would be all over the place, right? You want to have this one rod of uranium explode all of a sudden, and not a little bit here, a little bit there. So to contain that and to just release the forces during the explosion, that was the more difficult feat to do, because they had to develop an atomic bomb just 5 years after the uranium fission had been discovered by Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann and Lise Meitner. For the moon landing, you kind of knew what you had to deal with, right? You knew that it was Newton's laws, right? It was a rocket that had to be propelled. You had to find the best the best fuel. You had to arrange the fuel tanks in a good way. It was maybe more difficult to. It was a more complex process involving more steps, but the basic physics of it were more straightforward because they were just better known. And the uranium fission, put that into a bomb or into a nuclear reactor to get energy from, that was something that was very recent. So I think that was a more difficult feat. Also, there was more at stake. So you didn't have time to the moon landing 1 year later, 1 year earlier, not that catastrophic, but be too late with the atomic bomb and you're done, right? So that being said, however, the part that engineering feat, this is the interesting second question that's connected to that. Which is more important, the scientific discovery made by basic research, or the engineering that goes into getting the project out, getting the product out to people? I just saw recently, I think today on the internet somewhere said there was an article honoring the guy who had discovered or had invented the MP3 file format. I've already forgotten the guy's name. That guy's name is not on anyone's list, although I'm sure you have to think about, without his discovery, we wouldn't have iPad or iPod and all MP3 players. Yet, he did the discovery of the MP3, but Apple and other companies actually thought about ways and engineered ways to bring that to people so people could use that, right? It's kind of like, in a way, then if you invent the wheel, that alone doesn't help anyone. You have to find ways to put the wheel. You have to find ways to put the wheel on underneath a car, basically, to make it run, right? And it's an interesting question because normally the companies that bring the product to market, they get paid, while the initial scientists that made the discovery don't get paid at all. And it's an interesting question. What is more important to bring? What is more difficult, to bring an actual discovery to market or to make the discovery? And I would say actually it's more difficult to bring it to market, because you can make anything work for people. You can have a mediocre product and an old idea, whatever. You put that to market with a good marketing or find a good way that people can really enjoy it. And that is the idea that actually helps people. The discovery is more like an initial scientific idea that you then confirm. But there's so many ideas that just end up in a book and nobody cares about them anymore. So I would say, even though I've trained for 20 years in basic research and just focusing on doing the discovery, I'd say that bringing a discovery to market is the more difficult feat. But I mean, there may be other good arguments for saying that the initial discovery is the more important feat, but that's my impression. And see, this one question, what was most difficult discovery, developing the atomic bomb or putting a man on the moon, actually stimulates more questions. So I like those questions. So taken together, the questions that I like to answer are first ones that I have experience in, ones in which I sympathize with the person who asked the questions, and third, questions where I can actually, which stimulate my own thinking a little bit more. Those are the three types of questions I'm getting drawn into. Let me know what some of your questions are. If you are on Quora, what are some questions that you really like to answer? Let me know. I'm looking forward to reading your comments. And if you enjoyed this video, click on like. And otherwise, I wish you a very happy weekend and looking forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Take care.